Hey loves, welcome back to my channel. Today guys, I'll be checking out this interesting video from Thomas Sowell, and it's titled Why Nigeria's Problem Can Be Traced Back to This History. You guys, I'm excited for this, and without much ado, let's see what this video is all about.
As in much of the rest of Africa, independence in Nigeria marked the onset of internal power struggles among the disparate peoples lumped together as a nation artificially created by the colonial power. Even before independence arrived, different tribes and regions had very different reactions to the impending event. Igbos took the lead in advocating independence, urgently soon, with a strong national government. The Yoruba formed their own separate movement for independence, leaving more room for regional autonomy and with more of a role for tribal solidarity. The more fundamental split, however, was between the southern Nigerians as a whole and the northern Nigerians, who saw that immediate independence would mean immediate domination of the north itself by southerners, who already predominated in many branches of both the public and private sectors of the north, and whose far larger educated classes would ensure such domination in the future. Under British indirect rule, the traditional leaders and authorities in the northern region had more control of the region's way of life and its future than they could expect in a southern-dominated, independent Nigeria.
One thing I've noticed, Premier, while I've been here, is that northerners seem to have, I might almost call it, obsession about the Igbos. Could you perhaps explain that to me?
Well, the Igbos are more or less the type of people whose desire is mainly to dominate everybody. If they go to a village, to a town, they want to monopolize everything in that area.
That's true.
If you put them in a labor camp as a laborer, within a year they will try to emerge as headman of that camp, and so on. Well, in the past, our people were not alive to their responsibilities, because you can see from our northernization policy that in 1952, when I came here, there weren't 10 northerners in our civil service here. Then I tried to have it northernized, and now all important posts are being held by northerners.
Is this policy of filling all key posts in the north solely with northerners and not with other Nigerians a temporary or a permanent one?
In actual fact, what it is a northerner first. If you can't get a northerner, then we take an expatriate like yourself on contract. If we can't, then we can employ another Nigerian, but on contract too. This is going to be permanent, I should say, as far as I can foresee, because it will be rather dangerous to see the number of boys who are now turning from all our learning institutions coming out with having no work to do. I'm sure whichever government of the day might be, it will feel rather embarrassed, and it might even lead to bloodshed.
Doesn't this damage the idea, sir, of all people in all regions in Nigeria being fellow citizens of one country?
Well, it might, but you are, new to our region, but how many northerners are employed in the east or in the west? The answer is no. And if there are, there may be 10 laborers employed only in the two regions.
The problem was not simply that there were differences of opinion, but that there were no established and mutually respected traditions for airing those differences with restraint and accommodation. Vitriolic polemics in the press and in the political arena became the norm. Epithets like fascist and imperialist stooge became common currency, along with unbridled expressions of tribal chauvinism. A northern political leader said to southerners, "We despise each other." He said, "We call each other ignorant, because one group had Western education and culture, while the other derived its education and culture from the East." He added, "To tell you the plain truth, the common people of the North put more confidence in the white man than in either their black Southern brothers or the educated Northerners." This was not mere hyperbole, as events later showed. Dates set for Nigerian independence in the 1950s came and went without independence, not because the British would not grant it, but because Nigerians could not agree among themselves as to when and in what constitutional form independence should come. After a date and a constitution were finally agreed to, policies of Nigerianization of government jobs currently held by Europeans were proclaimed. In the northern region, the policy was more specifically Northernization, with emphasis on expelling southern Nigerians from these jobs, far more than expelling European expatriates. Even the first census after independence became embroiled in political controversy among tribes and regions.
Wow, you guys, this is a very interesting video from Thomas Sowell. The reason why Nigeria is where it is today is because of the disagreement between tribes. Every tribe feel they are more superior to the other, and even up to today, there's still disagreement going on between each tribe. They never seems to come to an agreement. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below, and let's continue watching, you guys.
And was nullified amid charges of fraud. Riots, plots, and coups also marked the first decade of independence. In January 1966, Nigerian Prime Minister Balewa was assassinated in the course of a military coup. All these political events had strong ethnic impact in a country where no single group constituted even a third of the population, and where major geographic regions were the domains of different tribes or ethnic groups. That the assassinated prime minister was from the Muslim northern region, and most leaders of the coup were Igbo military officers from the Christian south, proved to be of fateful significance in the way the military government's acts were perceived, resisted, and then openly rebelled against. In June 1966, mobs in northern cities attacked the Igbos living in their midst, killing hundreds of them amid widespread destruction of property. This was only a faint foretaste of the larger tragedy ahead. In July, a counter-coup by Muslim military officers from the north drove the Igbo-dominated regime from power and killed its leader. In September, new and more bloody riots broke out against Igbos in the north. Northern soldiers chased Igbo troops from their barracks and murdered scores with bayonets. Screaming Muslim mobs descended on the Igbo quarters of every northern city, killing their victims with clubs, poison arrows, and shotguns. Tens of thousands of Igbos were murdered in the systematic massacres that followed. In addition to an estimated 30,000 deaths, there were more than 1 million Igbo refugees who fled the region to join their fellow Igbos in the southeast. This in turn led to the fateful decision of the Igbos to withdraw from Nigeria, where they no longer felt safe, and to form their own independent state, which they called Biafra. The civil war set off by the secession of May 1967 raged for more than 2 years. Only 4 African nations recognized Biafra. Both communist and Western Bloc nations alike backed the government of oil-rich Nigeria, which was well supplied with modern weaponry to use against the rebel forces. Nigerian government troops cut off Biafra from access to the sea, and therefore from food and military supplies. Igbos began starving to death at a rate of 1,000 a day. More than 1 million people died in Biafra from the fighting, starvation, and disease. In addition, 3 million Igbos became refugees. When Biafra surrendered and again became part of Nigeria in 1970, the institutions and economy of the region were devastated, and many feared obliteration of the Igbo culture or even genocide against the Igbo people by the victorious forces. However, in contrast to the mass slaughters in such other African nations as Burundi or Uganda, and in contrast to its own bloody precedents, Nigeria took the path of reconciliation. Industry in the war zone was rehabilitated. So were Igbo political and military personnel, including some officials of the former Biafran government. In 1982, even the exiled leader of Biafra, now a millionaire businessman living in the Ivory Coast, was granted a pardon. Igbos again became a prosperous element in the Nigerian society, holding important positions in both the public and private sectors. Military rule in Nigeria gave way to civilian government, and to reorganized political regions designed to break up the ethnic blocs whose conflicts had plunged the country into civil war. Much of the new Nigerian government structure was modeled after that of the United States, rather than that of Britain. The turbulent history of post-independence Nigeria has been plagued by 4 major and interdependent problems. 1. Ethnic or tribal animosities. 2. Desperate political struggles to gain control of the government at all costs. 3. Widespread corruption. And 4. Economic breakdowns. Because no ethnic group trusts another to rule over it, elections and even censuses bring all-out efforts to prevail by any means necessary, including force and fraud. High voter turnout, which some equate with a healthy democracy, has been in Nigeria, and in some other countries, an indication instead of a fever pitch of political polarization. So too have been the drastic differences in voting support for candidates of different ethnic background from one region to another. Even in the 1979 election, held after a new constitution designed to mitigate ethnic politics, each of 5 presidential candidates received an absolute majority of the votes in at least one state, and less than 5% of the vote in another state or states. Control of the government has been desperately important, not only to avoid being oppressed by rival tribes, but also because the massive role of government in the economy has made politics the preeminent route to prosperity, as well as power, whether for individuals, tribes, or regions. As of 1964,
You guys, what are your thoughts on this video? Thomas Sowell is absolutely doing a great job with this narration. I'll say what the Igbos fought for in the late 1960s seems to all be for nothing, because even up to this very moment, 2024, and like I stated before, the problem that Nigeria has is not only because of bad economy, but rather it all boils down to disagreements between the leaders. And once people do not agree on a particular cause, there's definitely not going to be progress. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below, and let's wrap this video up, you guys.
governments at the federal, regional, and local levels employed more than half of the wage earners in the country. Government also allocated large sums to the various regions, which is also to say to the various tribes. In 1961, for example, the northern region, containing more than half the population of Nigeria, paid only 9% of the personal income taxes, while it received 45% of the money allocated to the various regions by the federal government. At the same time, the western region paid 64% of all personal income taxes and received less than 1/4 of the funds allocated by the federal government to the various regions. In tribal terms, the Yoruba were subsidizing the House of Fulani and other northern groups. Government employment also paid far more than the private marketplace, as well as providing opportunities for additional income through corruption. A scholar specializing in the study of Nigeria summarized the situation. Legislators, ministers, and high-ranking civil servants could expect to earn from 7 to 30 times the pay of an ordinary government laborer, even without considering their car allowances, housing subsidies, and other emoluments. And such official earnings were trivial relative to what could be amassed through favoritism to private business concerns and diversion of public funds into private accounts. The fortunes to be made through favoritism by government officials were based on the government's role as massive dispenser of largesse and tight controller of economic activities. These included the awarding of loans, contracts, bank credit, positions on public boards and corporations, military commissions, and trade licenses. Moreover, the men whose decisions would determine such things were often from humble backgrounds, if not grinding poverty, and were now not only affluent themselves, but were also able to help family members, but only so long as they stayed in office. To lose office was not to return to something of comparable prestige and earnings in the private sector, but to be devastated, both personally and in career terms. The extraordinary corruption of Nigeria, as well as the ruthless repression of opponents, were products of these circumstances. The utter loss of public confidence in politicians facilitated the military coups of 1966, 1979, and 1983. Investigations after those coups revealed an astonishing scale of corruption among the deposed political leadership, with misappropriations of funds exceeding more than $30 million by just one state governor, enough to pay more than 3/4 of the arrears in salaries of civil servants who had not been paid for months. The corruption of the electoral process was no less dramatic. A Yoruba governor, defeated through vote fraud, was later found by a court to have won, in fact, by 1 million votes. As an oil exporting nation, Nigeria prospered during the era of high oil prices in the 1970s. Oil provided between 60 and 80% of federal and state government revenues, and the largesse this made possible kept many groups reasonably contented. Both public consumption and private investment grew rapidly during the decade of the 1970s. However, a drop in oil prices on the world market, beginning in the early 1980s, caused drastic economic and social dislocations in Nigeria. By 1986, the value of oil exports was only about 1/5 what it had been just 6 years earlier. In only 3 years, from 1985 to 1988, the value of the Nigerian currency fell to 1/5 its former level. The federal government laid off 50,000 workers, while the state governments and the private sector also had large-scale layoffs. Foreign workers, attracted to Nigeria from other African countries during boom times, were deeply resented during hard times, and were brutally expelled en masse, largely to Ghana. During the worst period of the early 1980s, Nigeria had a declining national output for 4 consecutive years. However, the new military government imposed austerity, including a reduction in subsidies to the state-owned airlines and public utilities, and began selling state-owned businesses. By 1988, there was a rising national output, in real terms, even allowing for inflation. This growth in real output continued on into the 1990s, while the runaway inflation was reduced to just under 29% per year. Attempts were made to depoliticize the country's ethnic groups and foster democratic government. In 1979, a northern Muslim was elected president, with an Igbo as his running mate. He was re-elected in 1982, and then deposed by another military coup at the end of 1983. This new military regime was long-lived. As of 1997, it was still promising elections in 1998, though it permitted only a few political parties to form, not including those with serious possibilities of winning. The many difficulties encountered during Nigeria's first generation after independence were not altogether surprising, much less unique, and were certainly not worse than what happened in ancient Britain after the Romans withdrew. Nigeria has remained one nation, despite threatened secessions of the northern region and an actual attempt at secession by the eastern region. Clearly, Nigeria learned some lessons from its economic, social, and political problems and attempted to apply those lessons in new constitutions and new policies. The more fundamental problem for Nigeria and other countries is whether one nation can copy the institutions of another nation and culture without the historical evolution of traditions that made those institutions viable. Standards of honesty are particularly difficult to synthesize. A 1997 international survey ranked Nigeria the most corrupt nation in the world.
Wow, you guys, that was such an interesting one from Thomas Sowell. And let me know what you guys think about this video. The problem that Nigeria has is that of disagreement, greed, and who is more superior to the other. This is a problem that is plaguing Nigeria, and once the leaders can put these things aside, then Nigeria will be a better place. Let me know what you guys think about this video in the comment section down below. I really enjoyed every minute of it, and I believe you guys also enjoyed watching. If you did enjoy watching, give this video a massive thumbs up, comment, share, and all that good stuff, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye guys.